When you're out hunting for treasure, you never know what you might find next. Will it be a collection of coins that's been buried for years? A valuable painting? Some solid gold jewelry? Archaeologists are often as surprised by their discoveries as we are. And sometimes it's not even archaeologists who make the most surprising discoveries. Here are some of the most remarkable discoveries made in recent times, some of which happened entirely by accident. Had some Italian construction workers not been paying closer attention to the ground beneath their feet in early 2018, a jug full of rare and precious gold coins might have been lost forever. The workers were in the middle of demolishing the old Cressoni Theater in Como and had already smashed through everything, right down to the basement when the discovery was made. One of the workers saw something sparkling in the corner of his eye and halted the machinery to take a closer look. When he did, he realized that he and his colleagues had broken open an ancient Roman jug, which had spilled golden coins out of its shattered side. It's likely that someone in ancient times was using this jug as if it were a bank account. They're marked with the names of Livio Severo, Antonio, and Honorius, all of whom were emperors of Rome. So the collection was probably built up over a long time and started approximately 2,500 years ago. The jug had been deliberately walled up in the basement, presumably for safekeeping, but then forgotten about over time, and then lost as the theater was built on top of it. You're probably familiar with the concept of beginner's luck, which occurs when someone performs an activity for the first time and achieves more success than someone who's an experienced expert. 8-year-old Ava Bray of Southbourne, England, is a perfect example of beginner's luck in action. Her grandfather handed her a metal detector for the first time ever on the town's beach in March 2020, and barely 10 minutes later, she called out to him to say that the detector had found something. They dug into the ground, and no more than 15 minutes after Ava had switched the metal detector on, she was holding a Bronze Age axe head in her hands. It was barely 6 inches below the surface, so how it had managed to hide away for 3,000 years undiscovered prior to that point is unknown. Ava and her grandfather had to report their discovery to the treasure registrar at the British Museum as per British law, but they were ultimately allowed to keep their precious find. There's an old house on Stratomsk Street in Krakow, Poland, which locals have heard rumors about for years. It's said that a strange religious cult once lived there, and the property was full of buried treasure. We can't prove or disprove the existence of the cult, but we can now say for sure that someone left treasure behind at the address, because it was found in 2019. The old house was in a poor state, and so builders were inside the property to perform repair and restoration work, and it was they who found a collection of over 10,000 copper coins hidden in the basement. According to the markings on the coins, they were created during the reign of King Stanislav Poniatowski between the years of 1764 and 1795. It appears that they were initially kept in linen bags, but the bags had rotted away as the centuries wore on. Krakow Museum has taken temporary possession of the coins, while experts try to work out who put them in the dilapidated mansion and why, and it's likely that they'll eventually end up on public display. If they were to be sold, they'd probably have a value of around $500,000. In early 2018, archaeologists in Japan celebrated the largest coin discovery in the history of their country. It happened in Hasuda in Japan's Saitama Prefecture, where the long-forgotten riches were located within a humble clay jug. The passing of many years has turned the copper coins blue, but that doesn't diminish their value. If anything, it only makes them more curious. Calling the container a jug doesn't do it justice. It's an enormous pot, with space inside for a whole 300,000 coins from the 15th and 16th centuries. Based on their design, it's likely that they were once connected into groups, using rope or string through their centers, but the string has long since rotted away. As was the case in many countries around the world, the burial of coins was a common way to preserve property in the time before banks. It's hard to value a collection of coins when there are so many of them, but this haul is easily worth over $10 million. If we ask you to think of a famous British person from history other than a king or queen, it's likely that you'd think of William Shakespeare. The writer is considered by many to be the greatest who ever lived, and any historical artifact that can be connected to his life tends to be valuable. That's why British grandmother Sue Kilvert could barely believe her luck when she went metal detectoring next to Shakespeare Hall in September 2019 and found a red and white enamel ring that might have belonged to the man himself. The ornate ring is inscribed with the words, "Truth betrays not," in the style of language that would have been common when Shakespeare stayed here during the 1590s. Items of jewelry like this were known as posy rings and were common gifts between lovers during the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries. Might this have been a ring that Shakespeare was given by his wife, who stayed with him at the hall as he wrote "As You Like It" toward the end of the 16th century? Sue certainly thinks so. The provenance of Sue's ring is disputed, but there's no disputing the value of the discovery made by this next British couple and their metal detector. It's Adam Staples and Lisa Grace, who struck lucky in September 2019, the same month Sue found her Shakespeare ring. Adam and Lisa were teaching friends how to use metal detectors in a field in the northeast of Somerset when they suddenly got a positive reading. They started digging immediately and unearthed a collection of 2,571 silver mint-condition silver coins. Each one of them has a value of at least $1,000, and some of them are worth far more than that. As a collection, their value is in the region of $7 million. The coins are almost 1,000 years old. Some of them were made during the time of King Harold II, who was the final Anglo-Saxon king of England, and some from the time of William the Conqueror, who successfully invaded England in 1066. Some of the coins show signs of being tampered with by the person who minted them. That would have been a risky move in the 11th century, when the penalty for making fake currency was amputation of a hand. When you hear the words gold rush, you tend to think of California in the USA, but gold rushes have happened in other parts of the world too. In Australia, the biggest gold rush state was Victoria, where the town of Ballarat proved to be especially plentiful with the mineral. That gold rush has long since ended, and yet there's still some gold in the ground. A retired man in the state who wishes to remain nameless had made metal detectoring his hobby after giving up work and thought of it as nothing more than a way to keep himself busy until he made his stunning discovery in a pasture. The first time his detector went off, he thought he'd found nothing more interesting than an old bullet. But the detector continued to provide a positive response in the same location. And eventually, he found a 5-pound lump of gold buried around 3 feet deep. The value of the gold alone is approximately $125,000. But due to the unusual size and shape of the nugget, it's expected to fetch more at auction when its proud new owner eventually decides to part with it. We expect that almost all of you have heard of Pompeii, the ancient Roman city that was buried under lava and ash when Mount Vesuvius erupted in the year 79, and then rediscovered centuries later. But how many of you knew that the town is still an active archaeology site? New discoveries are being made in the half-buried city all the time. And here's a collection of some of the most recent curiosities. 2 whole family homes were excavated in late 2019, and inside them were found glass figurines of the god Dionysus, scarabs, and skull jewelry that wouldn't look out of place in the modern age. As the bulk of the findings come from a single house, it's possible, perhaps even likely, that they were owned by a female who believed that some of these amulets would bless her home and keep her and her family safe from harm. The small amber figurines found in the house are intricately carved and would have been expensive to acquire, so they would have been difficult to decide to leave behind. We wonder whether the owners fled and survived. In August 2019, 70 metal detectorists belonging to a group known as the Medway History Finders set off to the Isle of Sheppey, just off the north coast of Kent in England. The day was intended to be more of a meet and greet than a serious treasure hunt, but treasure was found anyway. Ashley Solly, one of the members of the group, got a positive reading on their detector and dug up a ring made of solid gold. and it's not just any solid gold ring. Based on the inscription, this ring was once the property of a bishop who lived during the time of King Henry VIII in England some 450 years ago. Adam Hunter, the appropriately named head of the group, believes that it might be the most significant historic artifact ever discovered on the Isle of Sheppey. The complicated engraving on the ring shows a king with a sword, a bishop holding a baby, and either a bull or a ram. The presence of the king might suggest a royal connection, and Henry VIII is known to have visited the island with Anne Boleyn. Might this forgotten bishop have come along for the trip? We don't want to focus on England too much, but it's hard not to when amateur archaeologists there find treasures with such amazing regularity. In April 2019, a group of metal detector enthusiast friends met up in a field in Buckinghamshire and spent 4 days digging a uniquely valuable collection of 14th century coins out of the ground. Having cleaned them up and had their authenticity professionally verified, they're now prepared to sell them to a museum for a sum in the region of $200,000. There were more than 500 coins located over the 4-day stint, many of which were old gold nobles. Of these, 12 of them are ultra-rare nobles from the time of Edward III, who was on the throne during the time of the Black Death. Perhaps they shouldn't have been so surprised. The town they were digging in is called Hambledon, and it's so old that its existence was noted in the Domesday Book in 1086. Anything found underground there is bound to be ancient. Finding anything that has a provable connection to an ancient British monarch is usually a good way to make a fortune. And so the person who found this gold hat pin in April 2019 is hoping that a link between the pin and a famous portrait of King Edward IV can be proven. Lisa Grace found the pin with her metal detector in a field in Lincolnshire, and after recovering it from the ground, she had it identified as a so-called sun in splendor. It's the personal emblem of the king, and was worn by him as a hat pin as he posed for several portraits during his reign. Aside from being a ruler, he was also a warrior, and during his first reign, his House of York was in constant conflict with the House of Lancaster for control of the British crown. As the design is so personal to the king, it's not unreasonable to think that it might have been lost in battle, especially since Lisa's discovery was almost certainly made around the year 1485. Even the stone, a purple amethyst, is known to be a favorite of the king. It's worth $15,000 just as a piece of jewelry, but if it can be proven to be Edward's, it could be worth millions. Is this next tale a case of a robber developing a conscience or something stranger? We can't decide. In 2012, a break-in was reported at a storage facility in Los Angeles, California. When police arrived at the scene, they found that a collection of over 2,000 lithographs and prints belonging to Scottish abstract artist Benjamin Cream was missing. That prompted a huge investigation, but no suspect was ever identified, and the stolen goods couldn't be traced. Fast forward to November 2019, and the Los Angeles Police Department received a phone call from a resident of San Fernando who was cleaning out a recently deceased relative's home and came across some 1,300 lithographs, all of which bore Cream's signature. They'd searched some of the titles of the artwork, including Ancient Moral and Flame-Colored Diva, on Google, and discovered they were stolen, and now they wanted to hand them back. They swear that they were never involved in any crime, and also claim their deceased relative was no thief either. The mystery may never be solved, but at least around $1 million worth of Cream's lost work has been recovered. The remaining 1,000 pieces remain unaccounted for. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!